My name is Bill. Welcome to the Night Terrors Weekend Show. If you truly appreciate real-life journeys into the void, do not even think of missing tonight's episode. Mythical places that might actually exist. Was the utopia of Shambhala actually real? What about the sunken continent of Lemuria? Tonight we visit the physical locations of these places and more, and we're starting right now. In this article by Mindy Weisberger at livescience.com, Ms. Weisberger asks, are these ancient ruins in Honduras the legendary White City? And Mindy begins. Deep in the northeastern Honduran rainforest, according to local lore, hides an ancient metropolis known as the White City. Its name alludes to imposing pillars of white stone that were allegedly glimpsed by Spanish colonizers and later Western explorers. The city is rumored to have been dedicated to a monkey god, worshipped by a pre-Columbian civilization. For nearly a century, explorers have searched for the White City in vain. But in 2015, a team of scientists traveling deep into the jungle in Honduras's La Mosquita region found ruins that could be of the most fabled city. Filmmakers captured the grueling journey in the documentary Lost City of the Monkey God, which aired on the Science Channel, using clues that had been gathered by previous expeditions, as well as ground surveying satellites and laser scans. They uncovered structures and artifacts that had been swallowed by the jungle, revealing secrets of an ancient indigenous culture over 1,000 years old. The La Mosquita region spans over 1,350 square miles and is one of the most pristine lowland rainforest areas in Central America, supporting Honduras's biggest biodiversity hotspots. However, the region is currently threatened by illegal logging and wildlife trafficking, creating serious risks not only for local inhabitants and biodiversity, but also for the preservation of important archaeological sites that could become vulnerable to looting. Filmmaker and explorer Doug Elkins told this to Live Science. Elkins was part of the team that discovered the ruins of what is thought to be the White City, in collaboration with the government of Honduras and Honduran scientists. In the 1940s, an American explorer named Theodore Morda returned from an expedition to La Mosquita with thousands of artifacts. He declared that he had discovered the legendary city, and that indigenous people described an enormous statue of a monkey god that had been buried there. Elkins' fascination with the White City began in the 1990s, when he first heard about it while working as a television producer. During subsequent visits to Honduras, he saw evidence in the jungle that further piqued his interest. I'm so glad his interest was piqued. He said, we were up in the mountains, many days by canoe ride from civilization, and we stumbled upon this huge boulder with a petroglyph, a man with a mask on, or a helmet on, holding a stick, and a sack with what looked like seeds coming out of it, he said. The rainforest was so thick, you could barely see more than 20 feet in front of you, said Elkins, who would have gone to the trouble to make such an exquisite carving on a boulder if there was nothing going on in this area. That detailed petroglyph, he said, suggested there were once human settlements there, even if no sign of them was presently visible. In 2012, using LiDAR, a technique called light detection and ranging, Elkins found further clues about the possible location of the ancient city in a large depression in a forest surrounded by mountains. As the survey plane flew over the jungle, laser pulses pinged off the ground in between the leaves and measured the heights of structures that were hidden beneath dense jungle cover, so that engineers could reconstruct the topography in 3D. Digital 3D maps of the ground then removed the tree cover to show the hidden shapes more clearly, revealing what appeared to be building foundations, agricultural terraces, roads, and canals in 2013. Elkins then filmed the arduous expedition 2 years later to the site. The team included filmmakers, scientists, a LiDAR engineer, jungle warfare survival specialists, and more than a dozen Honduran Special Forces soldiers providing security. Hiking to the remote location brought challenges that tested the group to their limits, such as encounters with venomous snakes, quicksand, swarms of biting insects, and even flesh-eating bacteria. Douglas Preston, team member and author of The Lost City of the Monkey God, a true story, contracted some kind of disease out there. If I'm not mistaken, he still has it, but he's being treated. The group's perseverance paid off. Deep in the jungle, the researchers found mounds, plazas, vessels carved with vultures and snakes, and a pyramid with a cache of stone sculptures buried at its base. Team member Oscar Castro, Archaeology Department Chief of the Honduran Institute of Anthropology, dated objects to between AD 1000 and AD 1400. One stone figure, buried with its head sticking out of the ground, could be a jaguar, thought to be a representation of a shaman's spiritual state during ritual transformation. But was this truly the fabled White City that inspired tales of monkey gods and lost treasure? That conclusion is still debatable, as many such settlements once extended across the La Mesquita region. Today, much of the Honduran rainforest likely conceals evidence of numerous ancient ruins that have not been explored or mapped because of their remote locations and limited government resources. Many of these ruins could represent cultures that are still unknown to modern archaeologists. On that point, Elkin agrees. He says, "I'm thoroughly convinced the entire jungle was probably urbanized at one time." Indeed, in 2018, LiDAR scans of the Guatemalan jungle revealed that the region once held vast Maya cities with more than 60,000 homes, roads, palaces, ceremonial buildings. The findings confirmed that approximately 11 million Mayans lived in the region between AD 650 to 800, according to a study published in the journal Science. The remains of other ancient civilizations are still likely concealed by dense jungle cover, Elkins said. That's the end of that article. Let's check out some art.
Gaily bedight, a gallant knight, in sunshine and in shadow, had journeyed long, singing a song, in search of El Dorado. But he grew old, this knight so bold, and o'er his heart a shadow fell as he found no spot of ground that looked like El Dorado. And as his strength failed him at length, he met a pilgrim shadow. "Shadow," said he, "where can it be, this land of El Dorado?" Over the mountains of the moon, down the valley of the shadow, "Ride, boldly ride," the shade replied, "if you seek for El Dorado."
Here at chronicleproject.com is an article by James George. entitled Searching for Shambhala. Where and what is it? Hey, Thomas Trevino. And Mr. George begins. Since the time of the Renaissance, Western culture has been on the way out, in the sense of being centrifugal. Its thrust has been outward in conquest, in commerce and conversion. Until today, its outreach has brought man to the moon. But man's awareness of the cosmos continues to expand. 10 billion light years do not bring us to the end of the universe, but only to the limits of our present probes. And the cat just turned off my monitor computer. I guess that's where she wants to sit. Curiously enough, the fantastic successes of outer space exploration seem to have unveiled more mysteries than they have solved. As we look outward today at the world of quarks and black holes and antimatter, we're beginning to acknowledge that we have barely begun to understand our cosmic surroundings. This awareness, now for modern man, of the limits of our science, of our understanding and of our consciousness, has encouraged what I consider a very healthy reawakening of interest, writes the author, in that other quest which so fascinated our ancestors, the exploration of man's inner space. The search for man's inner access and for the center of his own being had its expression in many of the metaphysical myths that have come down to us from each of the major traditions in periods of man's history that were relatively more inward. Boy, this guy's thick. So I'm really slogging through the weeds here. Whenever we look in ancient times and places, it was very different. Legends and allegories about the center of the world abound. In every culture there were cosmic mountains representing the axis of the world, capped by a sacred peak, from which there were typically 4 rivers flowing off in the cardinal directions, watering 4 gardens, and a whole mandala which was seen by that particular civilization as its ideal or archetype. There are many examples: the Hindus, Mount Meru, the Zoroastrian and Iranians, hy-brasil, and for their Islamic descendants, Mount Zanello for the Laotian Buddhists, Himmelborg for the Norsemen, and for the ancient Greeks, Delphi, which they thought of as the Omphalos, or navel of the world. In more strictly religious terms, the world's centers have been rocks or meteorites, such as the Muslim Kaaba in Mecca. Is that the thing in that little house? For the Jews, I'm sure that's not what they call it. For the Jews, according to the Kabbalah, the secret heart of the world was the Holy of Holies, in the tabernacle of the Temple of the Most High, set on Zion's hill, in the center of Jerusalem. For the Christians, it was Golgotha, which was situated at the center of the world, since it was the summit of the cosmic mountain, and at the same time the place where Adam had been created and buried. Thus the blood of the Savior falls upon Adam's skull, precisely buried at the foot of the cross, redeeming him. Even Columbus believed that the world had a huge mountain at its center, binding heaven and earth. Sailing off South America on his 3rd voyage, and noting the quantity of fresh water flowing into the ocean from the Orinoco flow, he speculated it might be one of the rivers of paradise, pouring off the base of the world mountain. There are many other examples which could be cited from other traditions, but all finally point to the same hypothesis: that there is somewhere a community of men and women who have succeeded in finding and transmitting the knowledge of how to achieve the kind of psychic breakthrough to a higher consciousness that even the scientific world is beginning to acknowledge as possible for man. At this time and on this planet, has there been and is there perhaps still a brotherhood or a community or a monastery or some kind of esoteric center belonging to one of the great traditions of mankind, or having surpassed the limitations of such particular labels, which has in a concrete way found what so many people who are not more than half asleep begin to look for today. Boy, this guy's dense. I mean, his writing is really good, but it's very dense. Where and what is it? I shall never forget an evening in our house in New Delhi in 1968, when we had the now well-known Tibetan teacher, Trungpa Rinpoche, staying with us. We'd been asking him about the Tibetan tradition of Shambhala. To our astonishment, he replied very quietly that although he had never been there, he believed in its existence and could see it in his mirror whenever he went into deep meditation. That evening in our study, he produced a small circular metal mirror of the Chinese type, and after looking into it intently for some time, began to describe what he saw. Within a circular range of high snow-peaked mountains, there was a green valley with a beautiful city where extraordinary people lived, cut off from the outside world by their own volition. In the middle of the city there was a little palace or temple on the top of a hill composed of terraces. Around this hill was a square-walled enclosure, and around this again other enclosures where people lived and where there were temples and gardens and other sacred monuments. It sounded out of this world. But there he was in our study describing what he saw, as if he was looking out a window. 4 years later, in 1972, when we were visiting Bhutan, we were invited to the house of one of the senior officials and nobles of Paro, Mr. Paljor Dorji, where my memory of Trungpa Rinpoche's description was refreshed by seeing a painting which Mr. Dorji told us was centuries old. Dorji, I think, was also appeared in Shirley MacLaine's book, Don't Fall Off the Mountain, at about the same time period. That was before the regime for which he worked was overthrown. Not by the people, by a different regime. On a wood panel in his living room was a painting several centuries old. It was a painting of Shambhala. A few months earlier, we had been given a Tibetan map of Shambhala by Mr. Tenzing Namdak, the Tibetan scholar and priest who had collaborated with Dien Snellgrove in writing the 9 Waves of Bon. Photos of Paljor Dorji's painting and Tenzing Namdak's map of the Shambhala are reproduced as figures 1 and 2. Ooh, really? So the reader can have a concrete visual impression of what Shambhala meant to a Bon artist in Tibet 5 or 6 centuries ago, and to a Bhutanese or Tibetan Buddhist about 2 centuries ago. Okay. Where would those pictures be? This thing's right about here. Okay, I see. I can do that. Where are the pictures? I see like 0 pictures here. Oh, Rob job. That's just the local mountains. The Lake Baikal Mountains. Rip off. I'm so disappointed. Other Tibetan sources, principally Buddhist, tend to place Shambhala in the mountains of northern Tibet, though there are some sources that suggest an eastern or southern border location, but always in the mountains. The one I feel rings most true, because it accords with the Bon tradition in linking Shambhala with both the cosmic mountain and the spiritual center, is described by Stein as being in Yarlung, in eastern Tibet, at the mountain Shampo, where the first king of Tibet, Nyathi, descended from above on a kind of mystical beanstalk, or robe, called a muak, a term which also appears in Chinese literature. The word mu, even in Japanese today, means emptiness, and is the equivalent of the Sanskrit shunyata, or the void. After 7 generations of kings had been able to maintain contact with their spiritual sources, and go up and down the Mutak, King Diggum, by accident or inattention, cut his sacred connection with the sword while fighting his enemies and was promptly killed. Having no Mutak, his successors were confined to the earth. We already have in capsule form the story of the fall of man, because the king or shaman lost his ability to fulfill his traditional role of being able to communicate with the heavenly powers and transmit their vision to other people at large. Okay, what's the upshot here? On the day which I finished writing this article, an Iranian friend in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs told me the following story of the famous Mullah Nasser ad-Din. Once the Mullah was visiting a village in Anatolia, where there lived a rival teacher who wanted to show up the Mullah by asking him a question that could not be answered. Accordingly, he approached the Mullah when there were many people around him and suddenly asked him, "Tell me, learned master, where is the center of the world?" To which the Mullah replied without a moment's hesitation, pointing at the spot on which he stood. "The center of the world is exactly where I am now." The rival protested that there was no proof, and the Mullah answered, "If you think you know better, go and measure the world yourself and find the center." All right, let's check out some art. Here at owlcation.com is a story by Dean Traylor called An Explorer's Quest to Find the Kingdom of Saguenay. And the author begins, "These 16th century French explorers must have thought they were onto something. Legend has it that a kingdom full of blonde-haired people with limitless wealth existed along the shores of a river in what is now present-day Quebec, Canada. Most importantly, the native people of the land, the Iroquois, seemingly confirmed the existence of this mysterious and very rich kingdom. They came to the New World, scoured the land, and found nothing to support the tale. Still, the thought of a kingdom in the middle of a vast and mysterious land wasn't going to die quickly. For several years after the first rumor of the kingdom of Saguenay reached the shores of France, the French sailed the Atlantic and ventured into the New World. According to some accounts, this legend was the reason that France colonized Canada. Some called it the El Dorado of North America, a reference to a legendary city of gold that eluded discovery by all those who attempted to find it. In many respects, that may be the best description of the place. Still, there's more to the story. Over time, some called it a real place, while others believed it was either a myth or a practical joke. Interestingly, there's evidence to support either belief. Either way, the kingdom holds a special place in the colonial history of Canada. To understand the mystery of the kingdom, one must look at the various images made by one of France's great explorers and the people he contacted along the way. It was with Jacques Cartier, the man who coined the term Canada, that the legend began its grip on the French. This is a meeting between Chief Donnacona and Jacques Cartier. Looks like there's two Indians that arrived by boat, and they got a dog with them. The years between 1534 and 36 played a crucial role in the history of the so-called kingdom. It was in 1534 when Cartier led an ocean voyage expedition to find a direct route to Asia. He believed he could find it by sailing northwesterly. Instead, Cartier's first expedition found Nova Scotia and the mouth of the St. Lawrence River. Along with finding these regions, he made contact with the Iroquois. It was not cordial, especially after he heard rumors about a grand and wealthy kingdom somewhere deep in the wilderness. The story was so profound that Cartier decided to kidnap two Indians, most likely to prove to the King of France that he had reached Asia, which of course didn't happen, and to get more information on the mysterious kingdom. Some accounts claimed the two Iroquois he captured were the sons of the tribal chief, known as Chief Donnacona. Other accounts merely stated they were two members of that particular tribe. Another unverified account claimed that it was the chief and one of his sons. In any case, the men revealed exquisite details about the fabled kingdom along a river. The details were enough to entice Cartier and his financial backers to fund a second voyage. The second voyage, Cartier set off from France in 1535 with the two Indians as well as his flotilla. The goal was simple: find the fabled kingdom and claim it for France. Despite Cartier's penchant for kidnapping indigenous people, the Iroquois were more than happy to help. The expedition lasted 14 months. In the process, they gained valuable assistance from none other than Chief Donnacona. The chief led Cartier further down the river and toward a connecting waterway that would eventually become known as the Saguenay River, in present-day Saguenay Lac Saint-Jean region. It was here that Donnacona claimed the river in question as being on the outskirts of the kingdom. It's not certain why Cartier did not go further onto the New River and into the supposed kingdom. Most likely they were running low on supplies, and they were in the midst of a severe winter. The weather hampered the expedition, The St. Lawrence and St. Charles rivers froze, and Cartier's flotilla had to wait until spring near the Iroquois capital of Stadacona, now present-day Quebec City, at a place known as the Framed Rock of Quebec, before he headed home. The second voyage did not fulfill its goal, however. It managed to open more land for France in the New World. The second voyage didn't fulfill its goal, however, it managed to open more land for France in the New World. In addition, the expedition from the Iroquois capital led to another village called Hochelaga. This particular village would eventually become the site of present-day Montreal after the French took over. There was another impact. Cartier decided to invite Donnacona to France. No accounts exist to confirm that Donnacona was either kidnapped or went willfully. Based on Cartier's reputation, however, the chief most likely became a captive. Well, that's where they went, down there to Hochelaga. Trouble in France. King Francis I heard the rumors of a mythical kingdom as early as October 1535. Thus, he was more than interested to meet the chief. The chief did not disappoint. He elaborated on the kingdom of Saguenay by telling tales about gold, silver, copper, and ruby mines. He added that the blonde-haired occupants lived in houses with basements filled with precious gold and furs. Enthralled, the king expressed interest in funding a third voyage, but a major roadblock prevented an immediate return in 1538. War broke out with the Holy Roman Empire, and the country's treasury went toward the war effort. On top of that, tragedy struck. Although many reports indicated that Chief Donnacona was treated well, he succumbed to an unknown illness. Cartier would have to wait years before he could fulfill his quest to find this kingdom. The long-awaited third expedition. By 1541, the war was over, and King Francis renewed the call for a new expedition. Once again, Cartier would lead it. However, his role as overall leader was diminished. The search for the Northwest Passage became a footnote. Instead, importance was placed on the quest to, number 1, find the kingdom of Saguenay, and number 2, establish French settlements in the region. The third expedition had new obstacles. In previous voyage, the Iroquois were hospitable. But the latest arrival, however, after kidnapping 3 of their tribe, Cartier noticed they didn't come out in droves to greet them. Finding this, especially after kidnapping a chief, Finding this to be a potential problem, he avoided establishing a settlement near the Iroquois capital. Probably a good idea. The most significant discovery did not come from the voyage itself. Instead, settlers found diamonds, quote-unquote, and gold, quote-unquote, in an area they were cultivating. But when examined in France, the diamond and gold the settler found turned out to be quartz crystals and iron pyrite, otherwise known as fool's gold. Things get bad. Cartier finally throws in the towel. With supplies and manpower seriously compromised, the search was over in 1542, and Cartier went home. Let's check out some art.
Hello, everybody. So I'm not home at the moment, but I still wanted to do a story. There is an insane story about a Native American that I think we should all know or be aware of. Sources in the description box below. Got my notes right here. So this guy's name was Tisquantum. Now, this is a Native American he was a part of the Patuxet tribe. He was sold into slavery, went from North America all the way to Spain. He found a way to escape slavery in Spain, found a way to go from Spain all the way to England, where he then found a way to get onto a boat, and then found a way to go from that boat all the way to North America, and then found a way from North America to get all the way down to his tribe. He spent years, potentially up from like 6 to 10 years, somewhere in that ballpark. It's a little hard to pinpoint how long it took him to get all the way back to his tribe. And when he finally got to that tribe, it turns out that he was the very last person alive from that tribe. He was alone. He was alone. This was all before the epidemic that killed over 90% of the Native Americans. Despite losing his entire tribe and spending years traveling the world to get back home, this was before something called the starving period, which is going into the winter, around this period of time. Despite this, he still helped people because they were going to starve. He still helped them try to learn how to utilize the land. He also introduced a couple of key individuals, one of which, his name is Massowit, and the first governor of Plymouth, John Carver. He introduced these individuals who then created a settlement deal, a peace negotiation between the Native Americans and the settlers. I think stories like this are very much forgotten or unknown, and I would hate for our whitewashed history to forget stories like this and what happened to some of these people.
And go to explorersweb.com. Was an article by Christine DeBrew entitled Exploration Mysteries, Iram of the Pillars. Both the Quran and later sources mention a mysterious city called Iram of the Pillars. Today, it is more flamboyantly called the Atlantis of the Sands, and like Atlantis, it supposedly lies submerged. In this case, beneath the Arabian Desert. But despite promising leads, Iram of the Pillars remains undiscovered. The original passage in the Quran reads, "Have you not considered how your Lord dealt with Iram, who had lofty pillars, the likes of whom had never been created in the lands?" The idea of a deity destroying a sinful city is not new. The Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, I would have put them in slightly different order, because they began with Judaism and then went to Christianity and then went to Islam. All include stories of this type. In Islam, Iram was supposedly home to the Ad people, AD people. The city was built by a king named Shaddad, a descendant of the biblical figure Noah. But this king grew greedy and opulent, forcing the prophet Hud to warn him of Allah's dissatisfaction. Takahama also too wants to know, am I designing some merch for you? Yeah, I'm looking into merch. Thank you, TO2. I am looking into merch. In particular, I want us to try to see if anyone would be interested in a bumper sticker, a Night Terrors bumper sticker. But as the king grew greedy and opulent, forcing the prophet Hud to warn him of Allah's dissatisfaction, King Shaddad and the Ad people disregarded the prophet's warning. As a result, God buried the city beneath the sands of the empty quarter in the Arabian desert. The sandstorm lasted 8 days. Scholars and poets often associate Iram with other names. particularly Ubar and Wabar. Both names make appearances in ancient and medieval scholarship, yet tell the same tale of an affluent. I'm going to picture here on my page here, where everything goes. Here. Of an affluent city submerged by Allah beneath the sands. However, some argue that Iram or Ubar or Wabar refers to a whole region, depending on one's interpretation or translation of the Quran. Credit for its nickname, Atlantis of the Sands, goes to T.E. Lawrence, also known as Lawrence of Arabia. There's a picture of Mr. Lawrence from 1919, an Englishman who adapted quite well to his local surroundings in the Arabian desert. The mythical city inspired the famous Uncharted video games and writers like H.P. Lovecraft. Most famously, 1001 Nights spoke of Iram as a city, mentioning King Shaddad's greed for building palaces entirely of gold and precious stones. The Ebla tablets, an ancient collection of trade inventories, ledgers, and other economic records, mention the city several times. There you go. It existed. Businessmen are not going to keep records on fictional cities. Italian archaeologist Paolo Mattai discovered the tablets in the ruins of a palace in Syria in the 1970s. The tablets date back 2,500 years. However, the tablets do not mention a location. In 1930, English explorer Bertram Thomas traveled to the Empty Quarter, also known as Rub al-Khali. His guide told him of a road to Ubar, a great city rich in treasure, that now lies buried beneath the sands of the Ramlat Shiyat in northern Dhofar. The expedition found camel tracks worn into rock that suggested a possible past trade route. No kidding. But the explorers unearthed no archaeological evidence. A subsequent search by Harry St. John Philby found some compelling geological evidence. His Bedouin guides showed him the Wabar meteor impact craters, which contain meteoric iron. That in itself is worth a fortune. They told him that God punished the Odd with fire from heaven. This led him to believe that a meteorite destroyed the city. Unfortunately, he later discovered that this meteor struck the area only a few decades before his visit. In 1953, Wendell Phillips followed the ancient camel tracks discovered by Bertram Thomas for over 30 kilometers until they disappeared in the mountains of sand. Amazing. So, did he get a bearing? They gotta be going straight, right? There's no reason to go any other direction than straight in the desert, right? Did he get out a map and see, well, he's going straight this way? In the 1990s, with the assistance of NASA, Nicholas Clapp and his team got a clearer picture of the landscape using radar. They observed a limestone sinkhole at a place called Shisur in Dhofar, Oman. The sinkhole contained pottery, walls, and pillars that dated to 1000 BC. NASA released a presumptuous statement that the team had found the fabled lost city, but academic reactions were lukewarm. While Shisur seems the main contender for Iram's location, several scholars expressed their hesitancy because of the site's small size. They do not consider it large enough to be a city. Other theoretical locations include Alexandria and Damascus, but these possibilities remain unexplored. Archaeologist Jurist Zurins favors the theory that Iram was a region rather than a people or city. Zurins backs up his claim with a Ptolemaic map, which includes an area called Land of the Labarete. He believes this region declined because of natural disasters and poor economic conditions. In his book, The Road to Ubar, Finding the Atlantis of the Sands, Nicholas Clapp explains that some explorers set off on a wild goose chase, based solely on rumor. He said Bertram Thomas's knowledge of Ubar came from his not known for their truthfulness Bedouin companions. He mentions Philip's expeditions, where the Bedouins promised to show him the ruins of the city. Eventually they confessed they had only heard about it from their grandparents. But did it ever exist? The heart of the matter lies in what Iram or Ubar means. And I lost my place, sorry. There it is. The lack of firm evidence may point to Iram not as a city, but as something else. Author Paul Neuenkirchen suggests that the name Iram might have originated from a foreign language and meant other words like nation or tribe or ancestor, or could have referred to tribes like the Bedouin. Since the Quran carries an array of interpretations, translations, and versions, the story could have been warped over the last 1,000 years. Therefore, the confusion may stem from an ancient linguistic issue. Once the word's true meanings is established, we can go about our finding whatever hides beneath the rolling sands of Arabia. Let's check out some art.
The mystery of the lost pyramid. So even the term lost pyramid has a mystery attached to it, but now we're adding the word mystery, so we've got this mysterious mystery of the lost pyramid. So we're going to look at that one. This is near a quarry in Dashur, southeast of the Bent Pyramid. Dr. Chris Naughton is featured in this video about the lost pyramid. So you can see Chris is pointing to the pyramids at Dashur. In the foreground, the Bent Pyramid, and in the distance beyond it, the Red Pyramid, two large pyramids that Pharaoh Sneferu built. And so in a quarry to the southeast of the Bent Pyramid, they found these limestone blocks which were very regularly cut in what appeared to be a pyramid. And sure enough, they found a sealed pyramid. So here, Dr. Naughton's looking at this block that seals off the entrance, and they thought, wow, if we can get that thing out of there, we have the hope of getting an undisturbed treasure. And so Antiquities tooled up, and they came out there and they set up the scaffolding, and then they got the pulleys going, and through modern technology, which is basically the same kind of technology that the ancient Egyptians used, they raised that stone out of there. So they shine the light down there, and what's there? What kind of gold, silver? Oh, so disappointing. How did a robber beat them to that? You saw the effort they went to unseal this thing. There doesn't seem to be any other entrance down there. What's going on?
All right, Kitty, stay right there. There, good girl. It was the cat. Anyway, we're going to do an article from allthat'sinteresting.com, a story by William DeLong. And it's called The Lost Continent of Lemuria Was a Myth, and then scientists found evidence. In 2013, researchers actually found evidence that Lemuria may have actually existed. And the author begins. In the mid-1800s, a few scientists working from scant evidence theorized there was once a lost continent in the Indian Ocean, and they called it Lemuria. On this lost continent, some even thought there once lived a race of now extinct humans called Lemurians, who had 4 arms and enormous hermaphroditic bodies, but nevertheless are ancestors of modern-day humans. and perhaps also lemurs. Well, there's only one place where there's lemurs, right? Don't they have their own island or something? And as outlandish as all this may sound, the idea flourished for a time in both popular culture and some corners of the scientific community. Of course, modern science has long since debunked the idea of Lemuria altogether, but then, in 2013, geologists discovered evidence of a lost continent, precisely where Lemuria was said to have existed. And the old theories started cropping up again. I'm going to have to mute myself on this other unit. And mute. No, kitty. No. Bad kitty. Over here, kitty. Come on. No. No. Kitty. Don't go there. Please. Thank you. Lemuria theories became first popular in 1864. When Yellow Rose for Texas, laugh out loud. When British lawyer and zoologist Philip Lutley Slater wrote a paper entitled The Mammals of Madagascar and had it published in the Quarterly Journal of Science. Slater observed that there were many more species of lemur in Madagascar than there were in either Africa or India, thus claiming that Madagascar was the animal's original homeland. Moreover, he proposed that what had allowed lemurs to first migrate to India and Africa from Madagascar long ago was a now lost landmass stretching across the southern Indian Ocean in a triangular shape. I guess they are in more than one place. I did not know that. This continent of Lemuria, Slater suggested, touched India's southern point, southern Africa, and western Australia, and eventually sunk to the ocean floor. This theory came at a time when the science of evolution was in its infancy. Notions of continental drift were not widely accepted, and many prominent scientists were using land bridge theories to explain how various animals once migrated from one place to another. A theory similar to Slater's had even been proposed by French naturalist Etienne Geoffroy Saint-Hilaire 2 decades earlier. Thus, Slater's theory gained some traction. Oh, good. I can see see. Seeing is good over here. Okay. Much better. Soon other noted scientists and authors took the Lemuria theory and ran with it. What's the upshot? On its way into novels. Fast forward to 2013. Scientists found fragments of granite in the ocean south of India, along a shelf that extends hundreds of miles south of the country towards Mauritius. On Mauritius, geologists found zircon, despite the fact that the island only came into being 2 million years ago. When, thanks to plate tectonics and volcanoes, it rose slowly out of the Indian Ocean as a small landmass. However, the zircon they found there dated to 3 billion years ago, eons before the island had even formed. What this meant, scientists theorized, was that the zircon had come from a much older landmass that long ago sunk into the Indian Ocean. Slater's story about Lemuria was true. Almost. Rather than call this discovery Lemuria, geologists named the proposed lost continent Mauritia. Okay, that explains that. Let's go on to some art.
Imagine a continent so vast, so ancient, that it stretched across the Indian and Pacific Oceans. touching lands we now know as Africa, Madagascar, and parts of India. But this wasn't any ordinary landmass. It was Lemuria, a place where beings of unimaginable wisdom and power were said to have lived. And they weren't human. According to legends and mystical accounts, they were giants, towering figures with not 2 but 3 eyes, 4 arms, and lifespans that spanned over 1,000 years. Their very existence was so extraordinary that some believe they weren't from Earth at all, but beings from the stars. Their third eye, centered on their forehead, symbolized a form of heightened consciousness, allowing them to see into hidden realms, communicate telepathically, and even foresee events yet to unfold. And yet, all this knowledge, all these advancements, vanished without a trace, leaving only whispers of a lost world beneath the waves. Could Lemuria have been a cradle of human evolution, a place where we learned from beings far more advanced than ourselves? Imagine beings who towered 4 to 5 meters tall. One of their most fascinating traits was their third eye, a physical feature right on their forehead. This third eye wasn't just for seeing in the traditional sense. It's said to have been a powerful tool that allowed them to access hidden knowledge, perceive realms beyond our physical world. They could understand each other's thoughts, emotions, and intentions instantly, using telepathy. Imagine living in a world where people don't need words to share ideas and feelings, a society built on pure understanding and direct communication. Besides telepathy, they could supposedly levitate, lift objects without touching them, and even see events before they happened. The Lemurians are said to have built cities that stretched across vast regions, from Africa to the Indian Ocean, linking lands that now seem distant and isolated. They constructed vast temples and structures from unique materials, perhaps stones that resonated with the Earth's energies. They were said to have been selected and placed with purpose, designed to channel energy and harmonize with the planet. Many believe Lemurian wisdom was passed down in secret after their continent disappeared. It was preserved by mystics, hidden in sacred symbols, and woven into practices that continue to this day. Could it be that fragments of Lemuria's teachings are still influencing us today, subtly shaping our understanding of the world and the universe? The Lemurians lived peacefully, focusing on inner growth, harmony, and understanding the energies of the Earth and cosmos. Then there was Atlantis, a civilization often described as highly advanced in technology and science. The Atlanteans were explorers, creators, and conquerors. While the Lemurians embraced a way of life that honored nature, the Atlanteans sought to master it. They constantly pushed the boundaries, experimenting with powerful technologies and developing tools that allowed them to reshape their environment. Over time, these two societies grew wary of each other. The Lemurians saw the rapid advances in Atlantean technology as dangerous. The stories tell of a catastrophic war that erupted between the two, a cosmic struggle that shook the very foundation of the planet. In the end, this conflict led to the downfall of both civilizations. Two great civilizations disappeared, leaving only myths and whispers of their existence.
Let's get on to hy-brasil. It looks like iflscience.com. There's a story here written by James Fulton, entitled Hy-Brasil, the phantom island that hasn't been seen since 1872. There are fairly recent accounts of the island, which was shown on maps for over 400 years. An old legend dating back to at least 1325, rates the author, describes an island off the west coast of Ireland called hy-brasil. There it is right there. Like Atlantis, the island has been impossible to locate. Unlike Atlantis, there's some fairly recent accounts, admittedly mainly of the somewhat dubious variety, of such an island by experienced explorers, plus nautical charts over hundreds of years old showing hy-brasil's location. The first map depicting hy-brasil was created in 1325, then under the name Brazil. It would change names over the years, including the monikers Brazil, Brazil with a Z, Brazil with an S, Breezel, hy-brasil, or Old Brazil. But the intriguing thing about subsequent maps was how they could not agree on a location. The island moved around the coast of Ireland somewhat erratically over the centuries, once even popping up just off the coast of North America. Accounts of the island are stranger still, ranging from sightings of a landmass shrouded by mist to tales of an island kingdom inhabited by an ancient people. One account from 1629 tells how several seamen had discovered it at sea as they have sailed on the western coasts of Ireland. Of these supposed sightings, one man named Captain Rich claims to have come so near that he discovered a harbor, at which point he began to sail towards it. In a reverse Desmond from Lost, Captain Rich continued to sail at the island as a mist came in, but was never able to make it to shore. The account, even as one of the most grounded of the island, is laden with folklore. It ends with the conclusion, it may be one of those famous enchanters, now inhabiting there, and by their magic, conceal their land from foreigners. Another account. A letter sent by a man in Derry to a friend in England describes the voyage of one Captain John Nisbet, who found himself and his crew stranded on hy-brasil and went out to explore. On the first day, they found the island to contain an old castle, which was completely uninhabited. But after going to sleep that night, they woke up and saw a very ancient grave gentleman, and 10 men following him bareheaded, as if his servants, coming towards the shore where the ship lay. Dropping all mysterious pretense, the old man threw a feast, where he began to tell the crew that the island was called Old Brazil, that his ancestors were sometimes princes of it, telling them also that he and several persons of quality, by the malicious diabolical art of a great necromancer, had been tyrannically shut up in the castle, which they knocked at yesterday. Thankfully, the reign of the necromancer was cut short by the sailor's incredibly believable visit. The curse was broken, and others would be able to see the island now. This didn't really pan out. As though there were other accounts of the island, its days as being considered anything other than a myth were numbered. A map made in 1872 would be its final appearance. There may have been no island to begin with. There was. Phantom islands have been appearing on maps long before and even after this, because it has been found. And we're going to see that in some artwork coming up. These are land masses that appear on maps despite having probably never existed in any physical sense. One known as Sandy Island survived on maps from 1774 all the way up to Google Earth, before it was finally removed after a group of scientists sailed through the alleged island and declared it non-existent. Then it was removed from Google Maps and Google Earth. Let's check out the art.
We in St. Augustine with my family, okay? St. Augustine. Apparently, this is the oldest city in the state of Florida, okay? And that's my cousin right there. Back to the Fountain of Youth. what they got going on over here. Oh, we got to drink the water?
It's spring water.
Where is
You
it?
drinking the water? No. It's right there.
Oh,
Like the Separate Hills?
oh, this is pretty cool.
Every time my son would never. Right there.
Well, I'm finna go drink the water.
That's like cooling.
The Fountain of Youth. Oh. Yeah, okay, y'all watch me now. Okay. Look, they got all this action going on over here. Okay. Yeah. Oh, it smells like sour water, yo. Ooh. Okay, this is the trees, guys, up close and personal.
Hey,
I guess these trees.
So guys, if you didn't know, this is a tree. But if you haven't been up close and personal, now you're up close and personal.
There's something going on with the trees. They got all these things hanging. That's why I'm showing y'all this tree. We're about to watch a movie, and it's gonna be up here. 13-minute long, guys. It's 13 minutes long.
What's he listening for? What's he listening?